welcome to Audiovisual Cultures. I'm Paula Blair, and today I'm catching up with Rachel Brook, who I hope you'll remember organised a special International Women's Day event that we recorded for the podcast back in March, and she also appeared in the Late Shows episode back in 2019. Rachel has been using creativity both as a means of working through trauma and in developing her career as a practicing artist, and these are topics that she's going to talk us through today. Huge thanks to our members at patreon.com/avcultures for your much valued support. You might know that I'm managing persistent technical difficulties lately, so memberships or donations to paypal.me/PEA Blair or buymeacoffee.com/PEA Blair are hugely appreciated. We'll connect now with Rachel in her studio, and just so you're aware, we are going to get into some tough issues as well as talking through Rachel's experience and developing body of work. But I hope you find this really fascinating. Hello Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. It's lovely to see you. I'm just in my studio at the moment. I've been painting this morning, or touching up some paintings, should I say. I've kind of been working on some stuff for a while that I'm kind of trying to just tweak, and yeah, I'm setting myself a bit bonkers with a few things, you know, when you're trying to get something exactly how you want it and it's not quite going the way you want it. So I'm great, but I'm also in this sort of little like, niggly space where I'm trying to achieve something and I'm not quite there.
We could just about see behind you, you're doing some very precise geometrical work at the moment.
Yes, I am. In fact, I obviously I'm going to hold something up which will be on the video. Obviously, if you want to see it, anyone who's listening to the podcast, you can check out the YouTube video. But this is one example of some little bits and pieces that I'm working on. So for anyone who doesn't know what this is, it's a tesseract, or a 4-dimensional cube. And so what essentially this consists of is there are 8 different cubes that sit within this space, and they share multiple kind of dimensional space. So for example, there's a cube here and a cube here, but the end of that cube shares that same space. Then you'll also have a cube here and a cube here, and a cube here and here. And that, yeah, the more that you look at it, the more that you can sort of envisage all of the different cubes within it. And what's even more interesting, and actually, when I first started drawing these, I was really obsessing over it because I couldn't figure out how to draw one. I knew what I wanted to draw, and I understood the kind of the theoretical makeup of it, with kind of axis space, I suppose. And it wasn't until about a week or two ago that I realized that actually the entire thing is just squares. So there's a square here and then a square here, but there's also a square here and here. And so actually what I now do, originally I was drawing them in a different way, but now I just draw square, 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 square. And because of the once you get so far along it, you actually the points that the next squares sort of join up, you already have a reference point from the first few squares that you've drawn. And so it's just fascinating that the 8 2-dimensional squares presented within an octagon create this this tesseract shape. So it's kind of become a bit of a weird obsession that I've had during the lockdown period. And I think something I don't know whether it's something that's come from it or it's something that I was already obsessing over and maybe kind of resulted in me sort of learning how to produce these shapes. But being inside a flat that's quite small, and kind of being limited about how much time we can go out and do things, and sort of, you know, feeling isolated or alienated by or both. And I guess maybe like somewhere in my subconscious, this idea that, you know, like if I could actually understand how 4-dimensional space works, then technically that would allow me to have more space. Because if this cube here is my living room and this cube here, which shares the same dimensional space as this cube, is like extra space that I don't currently have access to. If I can access the 4th dimension, then essentially I have more space inside the area that I exist. So that's kind of maybe where some of it comes from. I'm still kind of making sense of it all. I'm hoping that at some point I'll have some sort of, I mean, I think maybe that, you know, the sci-fi nerd in me is hoping that, you know, I'll eventually be able to understand what 4-dimensional space is, but I think that's highly unlikely, because this only is it's a theoretical framework that helps you understand 4-dimensional space. But of course, because we only live in 3 dimensions, it's impossible for us to ever really fully understand what it's like to live outside of 3 dimensions, because it's all that we know and it's all that we have the ability to experience. So if I go completely bonkers at the end of this, at least we've documented it.
It's I don't know, it feels like I've been finding it very therapeutic actually watching your videos of you actually colouring them. So it feels like you're taking us a bit on your voyage of discovery of these dimensions as well, which is quite nice.
Yeah, and I mean, that to a certain extent, that kind of comes from, I suppose, from being at home and also learning a bit more about how I can use the digital realm, the age of information, to my advantage in all of this, but also to share. You know, it's not just purely narcissistic, but like the you know, there's so many platforms out there that you can share visually, and like I recognize that you have to be careful with your like artistic property, your intellectual property, when you're dealing with, you know, the digital realm, because, you know, it's so easy to kind of put something out there and essentially lose it, whether it's, you know, whether you lose it emotionally or whether you lose it. And it's something I'm really fascinated about, and maybe it's a conversation for another time, but just kind of what it means to kind of to be an artist within the you know, the age of information, and not just a visual artist, you know, a musician, or, you know, a performance artist, or, you know, and yeah, it's definitely something I'm kind of thinking more on, and would like to discuss more at a future date for sure.
Yeah. So you've been working a lot on this kind of work a lot in the past few months, and if it's okay, could you take us back to where do you think the kernels of those ideas are coming from, and how that process of the working, of the creativity, how that's you know, what's the genesis of that? Are you happy to take us through some of that?
Sure, yeah, and I think that's, yeah, really significant to what I'm doing now, and you know, why I'm doing what I'm doing now. So I'll give you a bit of a kind of introductory background to sort of, I guess, the last 8 months or so. So up until January, I was working in a part-time job, And I've been in that for about 1.5 years after being made redundant from full-time work. And basically, the first week of 2020, I saw out the last hearing in a tribunal case that had been ongoing since before my redundancy, actually. And it was, really exhausting process, massively debilitating, really impacted my mental health and my relationship. And basically towards the end of 2019, my partner suggested that I leave the job that I was in. And essentially he said he would support me through the process of transitioning to basically making my artwork a professional endeavour. So I'm using, this is something I've only come up with in the last sort of week or so, but which is influenced by a few other things as well. I'm using a hashtag creative recovery because I think that, while what I'm doing isn't primarily therapy, I am finding this work therapeutic. Mm-hmm. Or if not therapeutic, at least, I'm doing work that also feels like self-care. Yeah. Which is very, very important. But yeah, like, I massively took a leap of faith. And I genuinely thought that by this time I would be, having to get a part-time job to pay bills. And that was kind of obviously something that's been an issue, because what I found when I was working my last part-time job, I thought, I'll work part-time, and that part-time work will allow me the time to focus on these, creative practices that I've wanted to focus on for a while. But actually, it's that the job was, it consumed a lot of my energy. It was a great job, and I loved where I was working. And so I do want to talk today about these sort of problematic work situations that I've been in, but I think it's really important to mention that the last job that I was doing, I was working for Good Space, which sadly is no longer running in the form that it was when I was there, due to COVID-19. And it was a great job and I loved it very much, and with that being my most recent job, I want to make sure that when I'm talking about problematic work situations today, that doesn't get mistaken for one of those environments, because it absolutely was a wonderful place to work and I loved my colleagues, and it probably helped me transition from being in that kind of full-time work life that was quite problematic for me, to actually come to to where I am now. And I've been a visual artist my whole life, like since I was a child. I've always involved myself in creative expression, and maybe like hadn't ever, as a child, like hadn't ever thought that it was something that I could do as a as a job, or and like I think that I've really struggled to say the words that I am an artist, essentially, and like my brain has tried to sabotage this process and like really struggle to just say it out loud. And like I think it's only been in the last few months where like I feel comfortable just saying I'm an artist. Like, oh, what do you do, Rachel? Oh, I'm an artist. Like, and some people, it's crazy that some people still sort of are like, well, what do you do? Like, my partner was trying to explain it to his nana the other day, and she was like, so does she sell paintings? And it's like, I mean, sometimes I do, but that's absolutely not everything that I do. And I guess there are two branches of work that I'm focusing on at the moment. One being kind of community project work, and then this more personal journey, which there are crossovers, but yeah, there's the painting. I do make artist film, although I admittedly haven't made one for a while, photography sometimes, but yeah, and creative facilitation as well. I mean, the last film related project that I worked on, I was facilitating a group of people to make a piece of film. So it was, I definitely had some creative input into it, but it was very much about them and their work. It was with a group of people who were living with grief, cross-generational. The youngest person was 12, the oldest person was 80. And essentially I worked with them and an ex-colleague of mine, a girl called Hannah McParlin, who runs Polaris Film. And we spent 6 weeks with this group of people and essentially supported them through expressing their experiences of grief through a piece of artist film. Because of the nature of it all, the film's not available anywhere because it's for them and it's for their personal use. And, you know, I think that unless they all were happy with it being exhibited, you know, we won't get to show that to anyone, which is fine because, you know, at the end of the day, when you're facilitating art and you're facilitating creative processes, it's really hard to kind of make sure that that process is not about you and it's about the people that you're working with. And so I'm trying to get, I haven't got anything else like that lined up at the moment, but I'm like looking for more opportunities to do that sort of thing as well. So yeah, that's kind of where I am. Was made redundant, had this employment tribunal, that kind of came to an end, and then I just made this decision to transition, and you know, that's kind of brought me to where I am now.
Brilliant. So I'm really interested in that idea of transitioning in terms of life and career, because it's so similar with why I even started this podcast. Would you be okay with telling us a bit more about what spurred that need for change in you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the really important word that you use there is need. Like it wasn't just something that I wanted, it was something that I needed to do. And like, I think I spent, you know, a large portion of 2019 either conversing with my therapist or thinking about my conversations with my therapist about kind of how, like, I just knew that I wasn't doing what I wanted to be doing. And that almost, like, I feel like in many ways, some of the jobs that I've worked over the years where I've been in like a structured working environment, you know, full-time hours, you know, large organizations, that it can really sort of gaslight you out of thinking about, you know, what actually works for you and what's best for you and what, you know, and I recognize that, like, you know, I'm in a position of privilege in being able to do this, although I did take some big risks, and, you know, like, I didn't know if this was going to financially work. So, you know, I recognize that it's not as straightforward as just being like, oh yeah, quit your job and, you know, do something fabulous, because it's not like that at all. And it has taken a really long time to kind of, you know, decide what it is that I want to do and look at what I can do to make those changes and look at who's around me who can support me to make those changes. And, like, I mean, I think one of the key things is empowerment. You know, I've been empowered by some really excellent people, yourself included, Paula, like, who've you know, talked to me about creativity and about art and about, you know, culture, and made me kind of realize that there's an incredible community of people in Newcastle that allow me to be able to do the things that I do. And so, you know, I'm here and I'm doing it, but I also recognize that, like, basically, you know, while I went through this tribunal case, which had a massive impact on me anyway, it was actually like one factor in a much larger experience of work-related trauma that I'm sort of still recovering from, where I've experienced abusive management, dysfunctional workplaces, poor ethics, outright bullying and discrimination, and just really toxic working environments. And I feel like I escaped my last full-time job, despite being sort of damaged and exhausted. And the irony being is that I was made redundant. Like it almost reminds me of I've been in an abusive relationship before where like I'm miserable and I hate the relationship, but yet I'm devastated when it ends. And that was kind of, I used to describe this job as an abusive relationship all the time, this sort of idea that like, I was miserable every day and I hated it, and I saw things going, I knew that I wasn't the only person experiencing these sort of negative things. And like, but you sort of, when you're in something like that, you kind of, you get lost in it, I suppose. And like, I think the thing that really shook me up was just sort of how much my professional confidence was knocked. Like 10 years ago, I was in London, I was working in marketing, in television post-production industry, and, then moved on to some film festival work, also in marketing. And like, to think that I was in a certain place 10 years ago, and then I've kind of found myself back in Newcastle for various reasons. First job that I got when I moved back to Newcastle knocked my professional confidence so much that I still feel the effects of it now, absolutely. And I found it really hard to talk to people about, or really hard to find the sort of the right dialogues to discuss, or the right kind of environments to discuss it, because there's a point where like you're sitting in the pub, or well, not at the moment, or you're sitting you're with your friends and you're like, oh, you're whinging about your job again. It's like you kind of like, I got sick of hearing myself talking about it, and so I had to change how I talk about it and how I think about it, and how that dialogue works in my life. And it kind of has to be, for me, it has to be a positive thing in some way. There has to be something positive that's coming out of it. And it's taken the absolutely incredible bravery of a few select people who are also ex-colleagues of mine, who are either previous or present, well, I think previous now, employees of the Tyneside Cinema, who've spoken out about how they've been abused and mistreated and then silenced, and that those kind of conversations that have been shared have allowed me to feel a lot more comfortable talking about these negative experiences, and especially within a professional environment, because I think there's definitely, there's this whole, I guess I suppose it's an etiquette, isn't it, that around, you're not supposed to talk about it. The bad thing happens at work and everyone, everybody knows, but nobody talks about it. It's an elephant in the room and it's always there. And actually, these things have to be discussed and they have to be made public. They have to be brought out into the open. And so I'm really grateful to the people involved in that campaign, for reminding me of collective strength and the power of having a voice, basically. I'm just going to share with you some information if anyone's not familiar with what's been happening at the Tyneside Cinema. There is a website that's been set up, and it's www.savetyneside.org, and that has a full overview of what's been happening there. It also has a petition that can be signed, and I think some more things are going to be coming on there in the next couple of days as well. So yeah, head over there to read more about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been following it closely, and it's been such an angering very bitter disappointment, because I think, especially because it's a cultural organization that professes to uphold diversity and inclusivity, and it's so frustrating that what should be the flagship cultural organization of the region really has been just to find out that not just that abuses have been taking place, but they're so intrinsic and endemic and devastating.
Yeah.
It's been really hurtful, and this it's an organization that personally and professionally I've tried really hard to support, and
Sure.
so it's been a strange one, and it's really frustrating that even before a lot of this broke on social media, when people took to social media because they weren't getting any answers. Even before this, when the closures happened with lockdown and there were the drives for funding and that sort of thing, I just find it quite frustrating to see all these messages that, look, we welcome the gays, we welcome all races, we welcome all religions, we welcome all abilities and disabilities and all of this. We welcome working class people, and as somebody who's sort of from a working class background but sort of made good, if you know what I mean, I've never felt that it's a welcome space for working class or poor people. If that alone, and it's an incredibly white clientele, and so on and so forth. So I felt that there was hypocrisy there anyway that needed to be called out. But then just the absolute raft of stuff that's come out, just so painful for people. And again, just the idea that it's a cultural institution where we should be having ideas and moving forward, and it's we should and can be trying to do better. But when there's an organization that's saying we do all these things and we're brilliant, there's alarm bells. So
yeah
yeah
and I think that one of the things that I've seen within the conversations is very much about the sort of, so these things have come out in the open, and these people are putting themselves in potentially vulnerable situation by sharing some really triggering information for themselves, and other people, but doing it because it's all that they know what to do, and doing it because they've been silenced, and that's the thing that really scares me about these sorts of things happening. And I know that this happens everywhere, or not everywhere, but it happens a lot. That people encounter these issues and they're silenced. They're either paid to be quiet. I mean, I guess, with my own tribunal situation, like, the thing about the tribunal process is that, it's public. And, you have a panel of experts who are there to listen to you and to listen to your voice. But it's also a really, like, arduous, long, stressful process that, you can do without legal representation, and I entered into without legal representation, and I did represent myself, but that had a whole load of I mean, I spent something like £150 on, like, buying a printer and sitting printing out all my tribunal documents, like something like 700 pages, and like sitting and putting them all together, and putting the page numbers on them, and making sure, and making little mistakes, and I guess maybe I haven't done anything like that since I was at university, where when I was studying, we still did everything on paper, and you had to get everything perfect to submit. I'm sure you know, and just that whole, like, arduous, awful process. But there's so many people who'll have experiences where they literally there isn't any evidence, and I think that there's something really problematic societally when, you know, if somebody says like, I have experienced this, and just because there's no evidence doesn't mean that it should be ignored. And this sort of idea that, you know, I think somebody highlighted a response in that situation, which was something along the lines of, we're sorry that you feel that you have been harassed, or we're sorry that you feel that you have been. And that just, not, we are sorry that this has happened, and not like, you know, it's very much like, we're sorry that you feel that way, but it's not an acknowledgement of what these people are actually saying. And in the use of words like claim, they claim this, they you know, they feel this. It's like, you know, there's that meme that you know, that people put out sort of during the kind of the surge of coronavirus, from Priti Patel, the sorry that you feel you have died. You know, and that's come to mind when seeing all of this. Like, it's, yeah, it's such a really problematic way of apologizing, and essentially it's not apologizing, it's a non-apology, as they say, you know. But it just, what that does is that puts the onus back on the person who is, I hate to use the word victim, because, you know, not everyone wants to be called a victim, not everyone wants to be referred to as a victim, but the people who have experienced these negative things, you know, that lack of acknowledgement, that silencing, that you know, inability to make an apology, what that does to people is it essentially says, this is not our burden, this is your burden, you will hold this burden. But I think, you know, what's happening with this particular situation is that there's so many people who've had so many negative experiences within, you know, these sort of past working environments, that they're actually all coming together and supporting each other in solidarity, which is fantastic, and I hope it empowers more people to do the same.
I hope so too, yes, because I know in my own scenario of an abusive workplace, it was very much a divide and conquer, and it's actually quite amazing to see people come together and say, no, we're not going to let you divide us, we are going to talk to each other, we're going to talk publicly about this. And as you say, that in itself is empowering for other people to see, especially if they've have been through something, you know, in a similar vein. Yeah, and I mean, it's, yeah, because it was all bad enough anyway, and then just the whole situation, the you know, the pandemic happening, the world going on fire, everything having to shut down. It's another thing that's used as an excuse to, oh well, no, we can't deal with that because there's this whole other massive thing that we have to do. It just keeps like growing up in a civil conflict that's now in peacetime. That's been the narrative always. It's like, oh, we have to deal with the legacy of this, and we can't, you know, deal with, you know, bodily autonomy or marriage rights or whatever. And it just feels a very similar kind of, it's systemically abusive narrative of, no, this other massive thing, hang on, we can't deal with that right now, you know, you'll just have to deal with that, you know. So yeah, but it's just so wonderful, it's painful, and it's hard, it's really hard to read the stuff, but I think it's an important read with all of these different people and all of their different threads, and daily they're pushing it because they're not letting it go. And these are people who are trying to do PhDs, they're trying to get on with jobs, they're trying to raise their children, they're trying to get on with their lives, but it's now the thing they have to do, because what if there is a chance here of justice, you know, because it's not now just an issue of acknowledgement, it's an issue of justice now, it feels, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just thinking maybe it's important to mention that, yeah, that anyone who hasn't followed this and does go into like kind of you know, delves into it, and actually, you know, there's a lot of information on Twitter, and a lot of these people, these incredible people have shared a lot of really personal information, and yeah, there is some quite you know, upsetting stuff to read, so, you know, anyone who does read it, just be kind of aware of that, because it is really upsetting.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, it's a strange feeling, as you say, like this. It's wonderful that these people are kind of coming together, but at the same time, you know, that solidarity, like, you know, it's, you kind of wish that you didn't have to have solidarity. You know, you don't want to be in that position in the first place, but you know, once you're there, that solidarity is so important, you know. And yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I worry, and I recognize that different people have different resilience, but I also, something that I've, you know, researched, is like the, you know, mental health statistics, both in the region but also within cultural sectors. And so the, you know, there's a significantly higher percentage of people who report mental ill health within the arts and within the cultural sector. And the Northeast has the highest, you know, the number of cases of mental ill health in the country, like by region. So the chances are that you know, there's going to be people who, you know, who are less resilient and who are going to really struggle, and they're going to find this really hard to come through. And you know, this, you know, my own tribunal situation, for example, was something that was a, you know, was triggering for my mental ill health, but it was also about my mental ill health. So I brought a claim for disability discrimination, and failure to make reasonable adjustments, to my ex-employer, because I was discriminated for my mental ill health, and I was, you know, there wasn't supported. And so that the sort of that spiral of kind of, oh wow, like I'm already really low, like my, you know, my mental health is already bad, and now I'm having to, you know, put myself in a position where I know that it's going to have a detrimental effect on my mental health when my mental health is already so low. And so, like, across all of the different places I've worked and all the different people I've met over the years who've had, you know, negative experiences, or had experiences where they probably could, if they wanted to, take their employer to tribunal, don't, because the process is so difficult, and you know, it's not for everyone, and you know, justice comes in different forms. But I think that, like, one of the things that I'm only just sort of finding myself to start to feel differently about is not being angry all the time. And it's very, when you've you know, when you've been mistreated and when you've been hurt, it's, you know, that anger is often there, and it kind of affects everything, for, you know, any, you know, any, and if you've experienced this this type of like workplace abuse, essentially every time you enter into a workplace, your brain is being reminded, oh, work, like, oh, so, you know, if you know, like, you if you step on you know, sharp stones with bare feet, it hurts. And so the next time you know, the next time you see you've got bare feet and the pebbles are sharp, you know, oh, that's going to hurt. Like, your body is naturally wired, your brain is naturally wired to to learn from both positive and negative experiences. So if your place of work is the thing that makes you, sad or angry or exhausted or miserable or suicidal, then every time you go into a place of work, you're going to be reminded of that, and that's always going to happen. And I really worry for the people that I'm seeing at the moment who are going through these awful things, because there's a long process ahead that they're going to need to adapt how they feel about work again, because that's the site of trauma, that's the site of of negativity for them. And I really I guess it's something that I'm sort of been thinking about for a period of time, and that's something we've discussed as well. I think is this sort of kind of how do we support each other to be kind of stronger through these processes. And maybe something that I'd like to do in the future when I'm ready is set up some sort of network for people who have experienced these sorts of things, to help them kind of rehabilitate back into a positive working environment.
I totally hear you, and it's something I'd certainly love to be involved with, because the more people I meet or reconnect with, and we realize, gosh, we have this shared story of surviving an abusive workplace, and very often it's usually somebody who is also a survivor of an abusive romantic relationship or an abusive friendship as well. So it's unbelievable how many of us there are out there, and yet it's I've seen this on Twitter as well recently. There's not a lot of, it doesn't seem like anybody's the abuser or anybody's the rapist, but yet there's all these people who've been hurt badly. So where is this coming from?
So you've hit on a really interesting point there. Sorry, if I interrupted you.
Not
there.
At all.
If you wanted to finish, I can wait.
Not at all. You work away.
It's because it's something I hadn't kind of prepared to talk about, but it's definitely been something that's been going through my head. And I think that, as you say, there's lots of people talking about these experiences, and yet not people coming forward. I mean, it'd be really a breath of fresh air for someone to come forward and say, wow, I was that person at work. And I think that when you actually break down what the definition of bullying and harassment is in a workplace environment, it's defined by how the person experiences it, not by necessarily exactly what someone does. So someone can be doing something that they don't necessarily even realize is a problem, and that's why you have companies have basic policies and procedures, at least they should anyway, but many of them don't, to have so that someone because someone does something once, and then you speak to your in theory the ideal is that something horrible happens, you speak to your manager speaks to them, and they go, oh wow, I didn't even realize that I was making that person feel uncomfortable. I didn't even but what happens often is that you get people who are allowed to behave a certain way, and nobody questions their behavior, nobody questions how they treat people, and they stay in companies, they get promoted, they become people's managers, and nobody's gone, hang on a minute, this, as what appears to have happened in some situations that we've discussed today is that, people do try and highlight to their managers, and of course nepotism has a huge part to play in all of this. And at the end of the day, if you're a manager and your friend is accused of doing something horrific, you would hope that you would do the right thing. You would hope that you would, but it appears that often that doesn't happen. But I think the thing that I've really thought about over the last few days is, so for example, in the stuff with the Tyneside Cinema, I think they've actually set up a Twitter account which is calling for the resignation of the chair of the board of trustees and the CEO. Now, the thing that's occurred to me more than anything is, like, when all of this is over, are they going to be okay as well? You know, and the thing about, so someone asked a question to a group chat that I was in the other day about, like, what does it mean to be an empowered woman? And I think that, you know, an empowered woman empowers other people, and doesn't, you know, take all of the empowerment for themselves and not share it amongst everyone, you know, or whatever. And I think that, like, as, like, there are, in my own cases and in my own experiences, there are people who I am angry at, individual people that I'm angry at, and there is absolutely a need for accountability when it comes to these situations. But I do wonder, like, you know, what, you know, are these people also going to need their own, you know, trauma kind of process after this as well? And I recognise how problematic that is, because, you know, you think, well, there are people whose actions have inflicted, you know, trauma on other people, but then, you know, they're also part of that same toxic entity. And, you know, if I can say, oh, I've been in places of work where I haven't been able to see the woods for the trees, you know, haven't been able to see outside of it, then, you know, it's possible that the people, you know, the people who are, you know, coined the perpetrators in these situations may also, it's not as black and white as that's a good person and that's a bad person and that person's experienced something horrible and this person is evil. You know, I don't believe in that kind of binary. You know, I believe in rehabilitation. You know, I really dislike the way that, you know, we prosecute people and the way that we punish people through our, you know, the prison system and things like that. I mean, that's a whole other conversation to have another day, but, like, you know, there is, you know, there's always room for people to change, and there's always room for people to recognize the things that they've done wrong. And I think one of the, like, the most defining moments for me, like, as a I guess as like a person who values intersectional feminism, is that, you know, I've not been kind to people in the past. And I've you know, I can look back to, like, times in my early 20s where, you know, I could have been that person at work. I could have easily been that person. Or recognizing that, like, I was bullied at school really badly, but that doesn't change the fact that I know that there were times when I was at school that I didn't make people feel very good either. And, you know, I have this really vivid memory of having a conversation with someone at school, and I said that they said, like, oh, they said something like, you know, oh, you know, why don't you talk to me in this class or something like that? And I said, oh, because you bully me in design technology. And she's like, do I? And I'm like, yeah. And she had no idea that she made me, you know, that her actions were bullying towards me. And then what I realized, like, much later on in adulthood, that actually I probably, you know, was that person at times too, where I didn't think about my actions. And I mean, I think the difference is that you know, that when someone highlights to you what you are doing is wrong, and you have the opportunity to change and you don't, then there's a problem there. And that's something that, you know, is damaging.
definitely, yeah, because it's, you need that moment of reflection, of humility to go, oh, that's not okay what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the knee-jerk reaction is to go, oh, I was just messing about, or I was just joking, or or you're taking it too thick, or things like that. And I'm completely with you. Certainly, maybe it's a use thing, maybe it's an arrogance of use type thing. But yeah, I definitely remember being very high and mighty when I was younger at times, and then learning more humility as I got older. And especially you think about, well, look, that action really hurt me, and it's just developing empathy, isn't it? That's why you can care about the people who directly or indirectly have done harm to you or have allowed harm to happen to you and not stood up for you. You can still be worried about how it affects their lives eventually, because because you have a capacity for empathy. And that is it. It's just, how much of a capacity for empathy do any of us ever develop? And then you can look at yourself and go, okay, the way I spoke to that person was uncalled for. I need to do better in future. It's things that it's checking yourself. It's because we all have hardwired prejudices. We all make mistakes, but it's, are you going to own that mistake and
Absolutely
become a better person from it? That's the difference. Whereas I think a lot of abusive behavior is perpetrated by people who believe themselves to be victims. They believe themselves to be, why is everybody ganging up on me all of a sudden? I have no doubt that there are certain people who are asking those questions right now at the middle of all of the Tyneside stuff.
You mentioned empathy just now, and that made me think about kind of how workplaces rely on these HR manuals or HR policies or HR consultants who come in and say, this is how you do things. And I recognize that these policies and procedures are meant to protect a company primarily, but like, you're dealing with human beings at the end of the day, and you can't like, I don't believe that a person can pick and choose when to use empathy. Like, empathy should exist whether you're in your personal life or whether you're at work. And putting like a basic HR process in front of how somebody thinks and feels is terrifying. And I know that companies do it, and I know that big corporate companies do it, especially, and like, they make it work. But when you're dealing with arts organizations, I don't think it's just not the same environment. And I like, there's all these sort of dialogues around, oh, it's so there's no money in the arts, but actually, like, these arts organizations, like, a lot, for example, the Tyneside Cinema is a national portfolio organization receiving like money every year from the Arts Council, from the BFI, from all of these different funding bodies. And like, I respect that the arts are massively underfunded in many areas, but I think that often the people who are struggling in the arts are people who are down at my level, like, trying left, right and centre, trying to get funding to be able to do things. Like, a big company that employs 100 odd members of staff should not be in a position like that. If they are being given money to run, they should be running properly. And they should be, if things are dysfunctional, if things aren't working, they should be, they should be going, well, why isn't this working, and what can we do to change it? And I think that one of the biggest issues in all of this is kind of how you get these dysfunctional workplaces that are micromanaged from the top down, and they're not people focused. And so they impact everyone who works there. And unfortunately, the people who have experienced trauma or have mental ill health, or have additional support needs, for example, they come out of these environments like needing respite, they need recovery, and often they end up back in work too soon because they don't have a choice. Not everyone is in a position to be as lucky as where I'm at the moment, where I've got a partner who can help me kind of transition into what I'm doing. Like, if you've got bills to pay, you've got bills to pay, and you have to figure out how that's going to happen. And so and I've definitely found myself like coming out of a traumatic work experience and then going into another job and just feeling completely like lost and miserable. And I mean, my biggest workplace trauma has led me to have extreme feelings of disassociation, finding myself like getting up, going to work, coming home from work, having my tea, going to bed, getting up, going to work, and just being in this routine of just feeling completely trapped and miserable. And I mentioned earlier, like feeling like I'm in an abusive relationship, and that's just sort of that's bonkers to me that so many people find themselves in these situations. And I think this leads to something that we've discussed previously, which is imposter syndrome. This idea where you're in a professional environment and you're employed into a position within that professional environment, and yet you feel like literally like an imposter, like maybe you're not as experienced as the people around you, or like everyone else seems to know what they're doing and you don't, and that sort of, as I say, that's led to me definitely feeling like things like disassociation, like just feeling really struggling to do participate in work social events, and feeling really, and almost like even like having a almost like use like self-deprecation to to get through it, and like actually put myself down or not believe in myself or convince everyone else that I'm not good enough or not capable of doing what I'm doing. And I mean, I guess the thing is that actually I can there's one particular incident in a past job where that there was something that made me so angry that like I went home and I painted and I painted and I painted and I painted, and I spent the whole weekend painting, and like actually that feeling of anger towards that situation almost fueled the resurgence of the painting that I've been doing. And so it's a very, I'm in a kind of complicated emotional space about it, because like I actually sorry, just waving my hand in front of the camera there. I'll start that sentence again for your edit there. But yeah, like actually feeling like these experiences of anger and persecution, and and like it's like going back to what we were saying before, like you can't really be angry at a company. There are, at the end of the day, there are people who make these things happen, and there are people who have power, and they have the power to silence people, they have the power to use nepotism, they have the power to use elitism, and like this affects your identity, and it affects your who you are as a person, and in a sort of weird, complicated, messed up way. If I hadn't gone through some of these things, I might like potentially have found myself now like in a job that I don't really like that much, but it's fine, and it pays the bills, and I live for the weekend or whatever. But actually having these traumatic experiences made me have this such an extreme, like visceral, like defiant response that no, I'm going to do something that makes me feel better, and I'm going to do something that works for me, and I'm going to completely adjust how work, like what work means for me, how I approach work, and what I do to pay my bills, essentially. And I feel like it's such a complicated emotional situation to be in, because I sort of almost in a way like needed that push to you know, needed that kind of anger to go, no, this can't keep happening, you know.
Yeah, I completely understand. Yeah, because there are times when, even now it's about 3.5 years since I left academia, and even now there are times when I feel, I suppose that the lockdown, it was this period of enforced contemplation, because it's made me feel like I'm still really angry. I'm still really, really angry at all of those years and years and years of really hard graft just taken away from me, you know?
Yeah.
Because it was a push, and it was one of those where I jumped before I was pushed into the
Yeah.
ring, you know, where I was the one who resigned, but they were going to fire me anyway, and I just wanted to get through it with some dignity.
Yeah.
And you know, but I still now, you know, I still see who I could have been, and who I was, and what I probably still could be capable of being in that career path. But it's maybe a bit like the arts. It feels like a very parallel conversation, because academia is a very similar industry in a way, where there's just so much systemic abuse, there's so much nepotism, there's so much elitism, there's, you know, very like the arts, there's very little space for people from working class regional backgrounds to make a space for themselves, and to be taken seriously, and all sorts of things, you know. And so much of it's very male driven, even though, you know, I think, you know, it's the working structures are in place that keep women out of it more so than for men, and that sort of thing. You know, so we really, really, I'm on board with you. You know, I get what you're saying, you know, totally in those areas. But yeah, it's really fascinating as well, just that idea of the artwork, yeah, having a difficult relationship with it, because yeah, I think certainly with academic study and studying culture, studying film, studying art, that was always for me my escape, my release from the horrible things going on in my life. And then work where I did those things primarily became the horrible thing in my life. And so it's a really strange association, but I still love all these things. I'm still a total nerd for cinema and for art, and I love learning new stuff. And, you know, making this podcast means that I get to speak to people like you and explore things and learn stuff, and find all this common ground. And yeah, but it's trying to reconcile with, so you're doing this thing, because I have found certainly during the lockdown period, doing anything creative, it feels necessary and yet frivolous. And I think that's just such a societal thing, that it just feels quite silly to, and I've heard of so many other people who've started painting or have picked something up again, who have been learning musical instruments or learning languages and all sorts of stuff. You know, I've been doing a lot of crafts, a lot of sewing and things like that. These are fine things I find really restorative, and they're so important for your health. And they're, you know, like you were saying when we began, you know, you're always a maker, a creator, an artist as a child. And where in our lives do we stop being those things? Where do we decide we're too old for that now? Or, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that you know, everybody has the capacity to be creative. You know, some people just don't. You know, some people don't find it therapeutic, or some people don't find it enjoyable, or some people, you know, or some people kind of, you know, I recognize that there's many different ways of approaching how you do your job, and I think that's really something. Actually, just to very interject that like, there's a big difference between how you do your job and how you engage with the people that you work with. And I mean, maybe the part of the, you know, me doing things the way that I'm doing them now comes from the fact that, like, you know, I've definitely had people, worked with people in the past where I've been able to say, oh wow, they're so good at their job, but like, I can't interact with them, I can't have a meeting with them, I can't, you know, if they have to give me work to do, or if I have to interact with them, or if I have to work with them, I know that it's going to be a nightmare. And actually you can't just say, oh well, you know, they're good at their job, so, you know. And I wonder whether maybe in a way this is just an extension of my gaslighting, where I've just like, I'm like, you know, I struggle so much with like the way that people have interacted with me in working environments that I just, it's easier to just, you know, write my own rules and do my own thing and do it my way. But like, inevitably I'm going to be working with other people, and I'm going to be doing collaborations, and I'm going to be doing, you know, commissioned work that requires me to work with other people. So I have to like kind of figure out a way of dealing with that. You know, kind of, but I think people, I think that you know, how people perceive the way that they should interact at work, I think that a lot of that comes down to a sort of you know, a recollection of how people interact at school or at university, or in other learning, because the thing is that, like, you know, those learning environments exist to prepare you for work. And for so many people, work is this sort of environment that you can't just go in and sit down and do your job. You have to talk to people, you have to interact with people, you have to work with other people. And I think that some people just don't ever learn how to do that properly. And you get people who work their way up to like management positions, people who end up running companies, who like don't even know how to interact with people properly, or treat people, or, you know, communicate. And that's just, you know, I think there's like, there needs to be a massive overhaul of like understanding about what these things mean. And kind of, you know, understanding what it means to be creative, understanding what it means to be, you know, and also like respecting the fact that creativity is, you know, is something that, you know, allows people to do the jobs that they do. And you can't, like, there's something about like, if you undermine people, or people feel disempowered, then how are they supposed to be creative? How do you you know, express and you know, express yourself and do the things that you need to do? And it, you know, I hope that the, you know, the lockdown period is something that's kind of allowed for a wider reflection societally, and that, you know, people are going to go back into busy working environments again, whenever that may be, whenever that's, I mean, I recognize that some people are already in those, like, you know, if you work in a hospital or if you work in a school, then you're already in that right now, or you've never left it, you know, during lockdown. But sort of, yeah, the hopefully, the pessimist in me is going, yeah, whatever, you know. But I hope that some sort of positive change with regards to, you know, how we appreciate creativity, how we appreciate people, comes out of the lockdown experience. And I mean, I myself have had my own kind of, right, like, I'm just trying to think of the way to put this, because essentially I've done really well during lockdown. Like, I had a few weeks of not doing very well and I still have had a few wobbles of not doing very well, but generally, like, it's allowed me to really focus, and, you know, really kind of turn my attention to certain things and get to a certain place with the work that I'm doing. And I'm conflicted about that, because I'm like, this is great. I feel like I'm in a really great place. I'm really happy. I've experienced all this horrible stuff in working environments, and I've come through it, and I'm here. But then I still have this sort of feeling of like, you know, I must check my privilege and check myself and remind myself that there are people who have been through awful things over the last few months and will continue to go through really, really hard times. And, you know, we haven't seen the end of this yet. And I just need to keep reminding myself that I've been lucky enough to be able to get myself to a place that works for me after everything I've experienced, but also really appreciate the incredible efforts of the people who haven't had a chance to, you know, paint a picture or make a piece of art, because they're flat out working. And it's sort of finding that space between the being happy and, you know, being content. I mean, you can never be fully content, but, you know, you can have moments of it or small experiences of it. And, you know, I guess I just have to appreciate this. For me to be able to be here doing what I'm doing and creating the work that I'm creating, there's also people in the society that are in really dire straits at the moment. And I just want to, you know, I need to constantly remind myself of that. I don't want to ever get arrogant or get, you know, kind of like high on my own sort of I don't want to use the word success, because I'm definitely, I wouldn't say I'm, you know, in a position of success right now, but I'm doing okay, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
It's a very subjective term, because I think that, like you were saying earlier about having to recalibrate what you think of as work, it's good to recalibrate what you think of as success as well.
That's true. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. I mean, I think just to try and tie up some of that a bit, because I think with what we've been talking about, I mean, you've been involved in quite a lot of community projects, or, you know, moving into more of those areas as well. And it's a really tricky area when you've been someone who's faced bullying and survived really toxic work environments. It's about, you know, building up trust. And is that something you feel like doing community work, but maybe through the arts and through practice? Do you think that's something that links up?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think the things that I've learned, you know, that a lot of these sort of negative experiences that we have, you know, that can lead to bitterness, that can lead to anger, and it can take a long time to, you know, stop feeling that way. And I guess I'll link back to, I mentioned earlier that I sort of, you know, when talking about these things through kind of social media channels, I've been using this hashtag creative recovery, and essentially that's about taking the negative stuff and turning it into something positive and impactful and you know, motivational, and in my case predominantly visual and artistic. So here in my studio I am working on an exhibition with funding that I acquired during the lockdown from the Arts Information Company. I'm a member of that company, and they had a fund that was opened up when lockdown began, and I was successful in getting one. It's just a small amount of money, but it was enough to be able to kind of get the materials together and pay for my studio and things like that. So I'm doing that kind of for so many hours a week. But I also have set up a community interest company during lockdown, which essentially uses kind of creative projects and arts to benefit the people of Biker Old Town, which is where I live. So the company's called I Love Scarborough Road, and it's basically you know, it's about giving back to society and re-engaging with kind of communities and like, I think one of the, you know, the sort of biggest impacts of these negative experiences I've had is like feeling like a drone and feeling like, you know, just in this sort of kind of this empty vessel, just kind of going about my job, and actually, you know, now that I've come out of the other end of this, and I've, you know, been through employment tribunal, and I've been through all of these things, actually I want to, you know, I don't just want to sit in this space of like kind of creating personal art just on its own, because actually what the process of painting does when I come here every day is kind of really allows me to have this like kind of meditative state, this really nice therapeutic process where I'm really focusing on what I'm doing. And that act of kind of really focusing and, you know, kind of completely clearing my mind gives way for me to have ideas and you know, develop things, you know. So a lot of the ideas that I've kind of come up with for some of the project work that I'm going to be doing that's community interest led has come out of me sitting and painting. And, you know, as I say, I wouldn't be sitting and painting, I don't think, if I wasn't kind of a person who's come out of the other end of these, you know, these negative experiences. I might just kind of be comfortable in, you know, in an all right job. And that's not a bad thing. It's just different to what I'm doing. And so in a way, like, I've been, as I said at the beginning of this, it wasn't something that I just wanted to do. It was something that I needed to do and needed it. And I needed it because of what I'd experienced. And I don't know, I couldn't say, you know, would I prefer to have not been through all of this trauma and you know, just be fine going to a, you know, full-time job, say, I don't know, doing the admin or you know, I don't know. I couldn't, it's impossible to say really, you know. I like, you know, I ask myself questions, big questions, like, you know, my mum died when I was 15, and I sometimes think like, oh wow, like I wonder what my life would have been like if she hadn't died. But then I kind of like, it doesn't matter, because this is what I'm doing and this is where I'm at, and it's not about what's preferential, because it just, you all you have is what you're doing here in this moment, and the only things that you can change are in the future. And you know, you have the ability to make decisions to change things, and like, the more negativity that you hold on to, and the more, you know, the more, I hate the term, but the more baggage that you have, the more, you know, weight that you carry around, like, the harder it is to progress. And you know, I'm sort of like, yeah, I want to empower other people who've been through similar experiences to myself to be able to kind of find their own path. I'm not saying that every person I know who, and I know a lot, which is alarming really, the amount of people I know who are either going through employment tribunal right now, or applying for employment tribunal, or trying to figure out whether they have a case for employment tribunal, from all different walks of life and all different, you know, different jobs that I've done, is alarming. And I'm not saying that every single one of them should, you know, get a studio and be an artist, because, you know, that's not going to work for all of them. But I guess what I hope for those people, or what I empower those people to do, is find what works for them, find what their route is. And you know, for some people, it's just doing something very, very different. I met a woman waitressing in a restaurant. We don't say waitressing, we say service staff. These, you know, seems like a bit of an outdated term, waitressing, but a woman who had her husband had died, and she just left the town that she had lived in for her whole life, and, you know, met a partner in and married, and, you know, and just left and came to Newcastle and got a job in a restaurant. And she'd never worked in a restaurant in her life before, and, you know, she's in her probably in her mid-40s, but she just was like, she had to do something different. And so I guess, yeah, it's about making changes, and being creative with how you do that. It doesn't necessarily mean, you know, make art or do something creative, but more like be creative about how you change what it is that you're going to do.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah. So we've got through quite a lot there, Rachel. I think it's fair to
I'm
say.
sorry.
No, don't apologize or anything. I just wanted to ask if there's anything else. You've mentioned quite a few things, but if there's anything else you want to signal boost while we're here, any other organizations or people you want to mention just as we come to a close?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I would have loved to have talked more about like some of the project work that I've got lined up. But I feel like the issue that we've talked about is it's so important and it's so relevant right now that I'm glad that we've talked about that. But with regards to the work that I've kind of got happening or coming very soon, I just want to shout out some thanks to the Arts Information Company, Arts and Heritage, the Newbridge Project, Well Newcastle Gateshead, and Bluestone Consortium. These are all organisations that have kind of helped me kind of progress with work, or that are, you know, are offering me opportunities to do work. And B&D Studios, which is where my studio space is, and that is within Commercial Union House, which is run by Orbis, who we've only been open when did we come back in? 6th of July. We came in, and they're doing an incredible job at keeping this space safe for me to be able to come in and work every day. And I'm so grateful to JP and Peter and all of the people involved in making this place safe and excellent.
Yeah, that's lovely. Well, look, come back on again. You're always welcome. That's when you've worked through your project stuff and a lot of your individual work as well. If you get your exhibition going, let's catch up again and see what's
lovely
going on. Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Brilliant, that's great. I mean, I guess one thing, so because the funding I got from the Arts Information Company for my exhibition, we're not sure if, you know, if an exhibition is something that's going to be physically possible in the next 6 months. So what I may do is look into funding possibilities to create a virtual exhibition.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so I'll let you know if I manage to make that happen.
Yeah. I think there's all the technology's there. There's nothing to stop these things from happening now, and it shows that just like working from home, it's been possible for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the right motivation and the right support and the right funding often as well, you can achieve a lot if if you're able to get those, to get that support and to get that. But I think that the only way to get kind of funding and support when it comes to work is to believe in what it is that you're doing. And unless if you don't believe in what you're doing, then how can anyone else believe in it? And that's I think finally, like, accepting what I'm doing and accepting who I am and who it is that I want to be and what it is that I want to achieve means that I think if I believe it, everybody I'm talk to about it believes it too. And I think that's the key. I believe. But who knows?
Yeah, I always think of in Sing Street, there's a line in one of the songs. It's you got to take the wheel and own it and drive it like you stole it. So
nice.
That's what we got to do.
Nice. I like that. That's a nice one to end on. Thank you so much, Paula.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. It's been really wonderful to catch up, and all the best with everything that you're doing. It's really great work. Thank you.
Thank you. Same to you. And I can't wait to hear it. Lovely.
This has been Audiovisual Cultures with me, Paula Blair, and my very special guest, Rachel Brook. The music is Common Ground by Airtone, used under a 3.0 Creative Commons non-commercial license. Episodes release every other Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts. Please do rate, share and subscribe to help others find the show. I'm always happy to hear from potential guests, so you can email audiovisualcultures@gmail.com or find us on social media. Thank you so much for being with us. Be excellent to yourselves and each other. Do take care.